all set. I just want to confirm, Nancy, you want to turn your video to make sure everything is fine with you. Rosemary, same. Maybe you can just check and adjust to see if your audio and your video works before we kickstart. So,
hello, good afternoon.
Yes, your video is off, Rosemary.
You cannot start your video because the host has
Okay, let me
stopped it. Yeah, you have stopped it.
Yeah, I'll make you co-host now so you can try.
Okay.
Yes, Nancy is back. Okay, we can see you as well. That's great. So, yes. So now you can turn them off whilst I do the introduction. That's fine. Yeah, sure. All right, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, all too soon we are starting the first session of this year's BRICS Dialogue. As I mentioned earlier, this is brought to you by the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. So briefly, the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory is a Sino-Africa-focused research and policy think tank, an advisory firm. Our work is cut out for us. We just strictly focus on Africa's continuous engagement with China. So we're tracking and researching and reporting on what is happening, especially regarding policy space, regarding public debate and conversations around Africa's relations with China. We strongly believe that the voices, the experts from Africa has to be at the forefront of the kind of conversation that's happening between Africa and China. So we're creating this platform to engineer and share the African perspective with respect of our relation with China. So that is what the ACCPA is. So our work involves research into multiple sectors and multiple areas of interest regarding Africa-China relations. We are also involved in creating platform that sparks conversation and debates. We had previous activities in some countries like in Tanzania, in Ghana as well. Just like we're having here today about the BRICS Dialogue, which is a very important global conversation now. If you are tracking what is happening around our world today, obviously you can know that such a conversation is very much needed, especially when we delve deeper to try and understand Africans' position and perspective in respect of what is happening in our world today in terms of multilateralism and geopolitical related issues. So for us, that is our work. And over the period, we've done some activities in some countries like in Tanzania and Ghana. We recently hosted the public forum on China's proposed global civilization initiative here in Accra, Ghana, which was a huge success, and we'll be able to spark conversation around how we can create a new world different from the one that we are used to, how we can create harmony and create a peaceful coexistence irrespective of the differences that we have. So we are carrying on that conversation into today's session about the BRICS Dialogue. So the BRICS Dialogue is an annual dialogue that will be hosted by the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. So we are seeking to track, analyze, and share key insights on Africa's economic development agenda in the context of the BRICS. So we're trying to see how Africa's own development agenda can or is related to the BRICS agenda. How do we marry the two? You know, what are the opportunities that are in there with respect to the BRICS and its relevance to Africa's own development agenda? Because as a continent, we have our own development agenda that are fixed into other milestone programs that we might all have come across, like the ACCPA, the Agenda 2063, and other regional groups and their kind of development agenda that they have. So how is the BRICS existence and how the growth momentum of the BRICS is in relating to some of these instances regarding Africa? So we are very much focused on Africans' interests in respect of the BRICS existence. And as we know, South Africa is poised to host the 15th edition of the BRICS Summit, which is where we are talking about the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, hosting their annual summits. And of course, there are a lot of interesting debate and interesting conversation, a lot of nuances coming up because of the current geopolitical situation that we find ourselves in the world. So it's kind of generated a lot of interest from all over the world. We believe that, you know, in most policy rooms across the Americans, across Europe, and across Africa, policy experts for you know, governments and agencies and institutions are all trying to really get a deeper understanding of what really could be a key driver, some of the conversation that is going to be had at the BRICS Summit in South Africa and all that. So for us, again, we are just speaking the African side, African perspective. So for us, our theme for this year's BRICS Dialogue, and this is going to be an annual event that will be hosted by the ACCPA, but we're starting the first edition, of course, virtually. We hope to progress into in-person dialogues in the coming years as we build more momentum. So we are looking at rethinking global development agenda. How can Africa benefit from the BRICS? So what is in it for African continent? And to delve deeper, we have structured this year's session into two. So we have panel 1 and panel 2. So panel 1 is what all of us have joined here as at now. It's going to run for about 1 hour, and then we have about 15 or so minutes break, and then we start the panel 2, which also deals in a different topic. I will leave the topic for panel 1 to the moderator, who will take over and run us through what exactly we're going to be looking at in this panel 1, right? Now, if you look at the theme for the BRICS itself, this year's BRICS is BRICS and Africa, partnership for mutually accelerated growth, sustainable development, and inclusive multilateralism. That is the theme for the BRICS, the main BRICS summit that's happening in South Africa later this month, right? So again, Africa is at the core of this because of how significant the continent is. And we all know that the BRICS, again, they are building momentum. You know, for the first time, the BRICS nations combined GDP, total GDP, was higher than the G7 combined GDP. And if you look at G7, we're talking about Canada, we're talking about UK, France, Germany, Japan, United States, and combined GDP. For the first time, these 5 BRICS nations GDP in terms of global GDP was more than the G7 countries put together. It was around 31.5%, whilst the G7 was around 30%. So you can actually see the significance of what the BRICS nation represents. And I'm sure once the conversation begins, we'll get to know other things that are happening regarding other more countries that are lining up to join the BRICS alliance and all of those nuances. But then again, we will strictly limit our conversation mostly towards African interests in the BRICS alliance for our session here today and even the subsequent years that will come. At this point, I'll be introducing the moderator for the session, right? So this is Dr. Nancy Rosemary Mnongya. So she is a senior research fellow of the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, ACCPA. So she's one of our colleagues based in Tanzania. She's a lecturer in the Department of Business Studies, School of Earth Sciences, Real Estate Business and Informatics at the 𝐷𝐷 University in Tanzania since 2022. So in addition to being a senior research fellow of ACCPA, she's a lecturer in 𝐷𝐷 University in Tanzania as well. She's a member of the Business Department of Research, Publication and Consultancy Committee. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Economics from St. Augustine University of a Master's degree in Economics from the University of Nairobi in Kenya, and a PhD in Applied Economics from the Capital University of Economics and Business in Beijing, China, where she focused on firm growth of industrial clusters in Tanzania. Her research interests are broadly in industrial economics, environmental, energy economics, impact evaluation, and the economics of gender. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be handing over to our moderator for this session, which will delve deeper, I think, in infrastructure, finance, and also, but she will be the one to do the introduction about what we're going to have. And I believe that in the next 45 to 1 hour, we'll be able to have a very insightful conversation on today's session. So Rosemary, please, you have the floor now. Take over and take us through the first panel session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hope everybody hears me, and good afternoon, everyone. I trust you are well. I'll be the moderator of this session from panel 1, as I've been introduced by Mr. Paul, a senior research fellow of ACCPA, and also a lecturer at 𝐷𝐷 University in Tanzania. Before starting our session, I will introduce two panelists for this dialogue, starting with Dr. Nancy Lohalo, who is a Senior Research Fellow of ACCPA. So Dr. Nancy is our fellow and a member of ACCPA. We are working together as a team member. Dr. Nancy spent over a decade in Beijing, China, where she completed her PhD in International Trade Economics at the University of International Business and Economics, UIBE, with other accolades for excellence in academia. She is an economist, consultant, and associate professor at the 𝐼SP in Kinshasa, DRC, Congo. Prior to her return to Congo, she was a research analyst for African-led international consulting firm, where she primarily assessed the China-Africa strategic partnerships, highlighting the necessity for African countries to truly understand their development needs and effectively. Dr. Nancy Lohalo's ability to speak fluent Mandarin Chinese led her to work as a consultant for the Chinese state-owned company regarding investments in Congo's telecommunications sector under the Belt and Road Initiative. Also, she provided a Congolese lens to determine the project's feasibility in the country and its potential position in the market. Her areas of research expert lie at the intersection of international economics and the digital economy, with particular attention on women's economic empowerment and international development. That's about Dr. Nancy Lohalo. And then another panelist will be Ms. 𝐅𝐞𝐚𝐿, who is the principal at Botho Emerging Markets Group. 𝐼SAC is an international political economy advisor and experienced global executive with political and investment acumen in Africa and the larger global South, keen on empowering development economies by creating opportunities, catalyzing conversations, and connecting capital. He is the founder and the principal of Botho Emerging Markets Group and has over 2 decades of experience working in 20 markets across North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. He is also a co-founder of the Sign Africa Center of Excellence, an organization that facilitates partnerships between Chinese and African private and public sector actors. He serves on several boards, including Arshos University, Kepler University, the Greg Marshall Trust Investment Advisory Board, the Boardroom Africa, and others. 𝐼SAC also holds MA in International Relations from University of Chicago, an MBA from Caldas School of Business, certificate in Executive Education in Leadership from Oxford University Business School. So that is the simple introduction of our 2 panelists who will take us through the agenda, the BRICS agenda, which is rethinking global development agenda. How can Africa benefit from the BRICS? So
yeah. So Nancy, Rosemary, sorry. So Isaac hasn't joined us yet, so you'll be just go straight to have a conversation with Nancy and work on that.
Okay. I'll start by giving an overview of this topic. So this panel will look into pressing issues of infrastructure development in Africa and how BRICS nations can play a pivotal role in bridging the gaps. And our discussion will focus on identifying key areas of collaboration, such as financing mechanisms, technology transfer, and expert sharing. So this panel will also explore infrastructure growth, enhance connectivity, and boost economic development, ultimately fostering sustainability and progress across the continent. So to start with, I'll welcome Dr. Nancy Lohalo to give us some perspective from her side and shares her views on this matter. And then from there, we can proceed. Welcome, Dr. Nancy.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Yes, loud and clear. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, good morning to all of you. Firstly, thank you for the introduction, Dr. Rosemary. So today's topic, I think I will maybe start from a larger perspective, is how can Africa benefit from the BRICS? Firstly, I will start by saying that rethinking the global agenda in this specific context is timely and much needed, especially to ensure that African countries can indeed benefit from the various cooperation and partnerships within BRICS, given that we have several countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. From a broader perspective, we have been dealing from the same international order and mechanisms for years and years, which is not entirely negative. But there is a real need for revitalization, and Africa today has other aspirations, if I may say. So we have entered this new era where we want to become real players on the international scene. So today we also are experiencing a shift in global economic power towards the most multifaceted BRICS bloc. So BRICS, I think it's also important maybe to put the floor on establish the economic landscape that we are dealing with when it comes to BRICS. So since its creation, the BRICS, they have tremendously gained in influence and in strength. Today, it is said that approximately 40 countries are have expressed interest in joining the BRICS group, and more than 20, I think 21 or 22 have formally asked to join the group. So it shows how today it's the level of influence it has today. Looking at it maybe also from a more economic perspective, the GDP, the cumulative GDP of all the BRICS countries now is said to surpass the global share of the G6 countries' GDP. And BRICS countries also account for 40% of the global population, which is apparently 3 billion of people. Besides this economy, the large economic size of BRICS countries, we also have the different, we'll say, kind of equivalent of Bretton Woods institutions. So we have the New Development Bank that is said to be kind of like the equivalent of, you can say, the World Bank, although the assets differ greatly. So I think it was it's also important to understand the economic landscape of the BRICS countries, and now as Africa, how can Africa actually benefit from a broader perspective within the BRICS countries? When we look at BRICS countries, we have one country, China, and it's impossible to overlook China, to not single out China when it comes to looking at BRICS and Africa relations. China is a major partner for many African countries today. Whether it is a trading partner, whether it's in terms of investment, whether it is in terms of infrastructure development, in comparison also to other BRICS countries that may have an influence that is lower. So if we look maybe from the trade perspective to have an idea, China is a major trading partner for many countries. For my country, for DRC country, approximately 60% of trade of exports are allocated to China. When it comes to other BRICS countries, that is, we can see a great difference. So for instance, for Russia, it's less than 1%. For India, it's approximately less than 10%. As well. So we can see that how only from this example, and there are many more across Africa, how China is an important player when it comes to these relations. I would also say that not necessarily focusing on China, but maybe looking at it since today the world is closer than ever before. We can see it through trade, as I said. But if we want to be more specific, we have the development of the different the global value chains where the production process is fragmented among different countries. We also have technology that is helping the world to get closer and closer. So there are numerous ways to create this win-win partnership with the BRICS countries, and various ways that Africa can benefit from them. And it's also important to note that the BRICS countries, they are profoundly different. They have different political regimes, they have different endowments. Some export commodities, some import them, some are more labor abundant, some are more capital abundant countries, and so on. So I will stop here. I don't know, Dr. Rosemary, do you have anything you want to clarify or to go deeper before I continue?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nance, for your insightful. But I have some few questions, of which through them we can, while answering them, we can proceed with our discussion, and others can chip on later. Concerning technology transfer, what strategies can be adopted to facilitate the seamless transfer of advanced technological solutions from BRICS nations to Africa, fostering homegrown experts and boosting infrastructural development? On project prioritization, wanted us to discuss on that, given the multitude of infrastructure needs, how can Africa strategically prioritize projects that yield the most significant socioeconomic impacts? And what role can BRICS play in aligning resources with these priorities?
Hello?
Yes, hello?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I think I lost you because I cannot hear properly.
Okay, maybe I typed them in the chat box. How about now? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I had a concern on technology transfer.
Yes.
And then my question was, what strategies can be adopted to facilitate the seamless transfer of advanced technological solutions from BRICS nations to Africa, fostering homegrown experts and bolstering infrastructural development?
Okay. Did you get that?
I didn't hear the last word.
Okay, let me.
But I can go for the first question. So if I understood well, how can we ensure that technological transfer occurs in the best way possible from the BRICS countries to Africa, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I think that for this specific question, I will focus on one specific example, which is China. So, as we know, China is a major investor in different African countries. And obviously investments often comes with, in this case, and especially when we consider the context of the Belt and Road Initiative, it comes with infrastructure development. To develop this infrastructure, modern infrastructure development, we need to be able to handle specific technologies, to have a specific savoir-faire that is not necessarily available in our different countries. Therefore, usually when they come and invest in our countries, I know that it's different than in China. So for instance, in China, now when companies go and invest, set their businesses and start their different activities, there is a rule that said they have that technological transfer is imperative. They have to actually do the technological transfer. So I think that this can be the first step when we do have investment from the BRICS countries that comes within our different countries, that there is some specific rules, some rules that are backed legally, saying that when they come and invest, technological transfer is an imperative to start with. I think that this is the first way to ensure that it is done. It is done, first of all, but how to ensure now that it is properly done? Now it comes to reinforce. How do we reinforce this? That make sure that this role is actually being implemented. That is also another point. So we have different mechanisms that can be put into implementation, making sure that we have this control from maybe our government, that we make sure that we have discussions, because it's supposed to be a win-win partnership, making sure that we have constant contact with the different players, making sure to emphasize of the significance of having this technological transfer, because usually when it comes to this type of partnerships, it's often public and private partnerships. So the private sector, usually they have their own, not own agenda, but they have their own objective. The first objective of the private partners is to make profit, which is normal. The objective of the public part of it is to ensure that the population or ensure that citizens can actually benefit from it. There is a social objective in it. So it's our responsibility as the public sector also to make sure that we push this that the technological transfer actually occurs in the best way possible, and that we actually, as I said before, implement all of these different elements.
Thank you.
And I didn't hear properly the second question.
Okay, I can repeat it. It's about financing models. How can BRICS nations collaborate with African countries to design innovative financing models that address the vast infrastructure needs while ensuring long-term sustainability and accountability?
Okay. Thank you. I will go again, another example. And I think it's a great example given that it is within the BRICS, and especially it's regarding China as well. With the Belt and Road Initiative. So the Belt and Road Initiative, I think that at this point we have had numerous occasions to learn about. So it aims to promote connectivity among different countries around the world, and it heavily relies on massive infrastructure development as well as other components. But if we just focus on the infrastructure development, and if we look at it, maybe the different financing models. So considering massive infrastructure development, what we usually do to finance the different projects, we do this public and private partnership. So we do have the public sector that is, for instance, in Africa, that we are in great need of railroads, of roads, of infrastructure such as hospitals, airports, and so on, modernized infrastructure to promote economic growth, to promote trade, to promote investment, and so on. So when it comes to the public-private partnerships that we often see, which is considered to be now the best way to finance, to have the finance these different projects. We have the social aspects of the private sector, of the public sector, and we have the more, let's say, kind of like profit aspect of the private sector as well. And the two combined, trying to have this win-win partnership. For instance, in China, they have many industries have, we say, overcapacity, and they are also trying to, find new markets. So Africa constitutes this opportunity, and Africa needs infrastructure, modern infrastructure, to be able to promote economic development, economic growth, and so on. So combined together, there are different ways that we can finance a project, massive infrastructure project. For instance, still considering the Belt and Road Initiative in Djibouti, they have used the build, operate, and transfer type of model, meaning that the government, they do not have necessarily the assets to invest directly and to build this massive infrastructure. So they find ways to get loans, and the private sector now will be in charge of building the infrastructure, operate, to generate money, to start getting paid back over an extensive period of time. And when it's done, when they have taken back what they have invested, and the different also different other elements, they will transfer it back to the country. So I think that's a great way, given that the government will not necessarily have the assets to do it by themselves, but the need to promote development, to promote economic growth, to have infrastructure, to have public infrastructure to serve the citizens is an imperative. So I think that this is a great example of a way to finance the different infrastructure.
Thank you again, once again, Dr. Nancy. It was very insightful, and we are all knowledgeable about the African infrastructure development from your perspective. Now I'm welcoming participants. If you have anything you want to know more about this BRICS dialogue on rethinking global development agenda, how can Africa benefit from the BRICS, then you can use the chat box to write your questions, and then they can be addressed one by one. Or you will raise your hand, and then you can be given a chance to speak. We have those two options. Either you raise your hand or you write something on the chat box. Not only questions, but you can have comments or any idea you want to share with us, with everyone here, then we can hear from you. So far from my chat box, I have 3 observations, and then one says, thank you for the presentation. Do you think African infrastructure development can be solely provided by the foreign countries like China? Where is the place of local politicians? And then Kalebu Anobil says, I have really not come across the BRICS nations aligning financial resources to the very young entrepreneurs in Africa. What's the strategy for very young entrepreneurs in Africa? Some practical examples will help.
Okay, so I think we'll have to ask the question one after the other first, so that she can probably get it answered. But before that, I have a question that I want to ask. Rosemary, are you done with your questions? The one that you...
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to ask a question about project prioritization, respect to the infrastructure development that we are discussing. So I just wanted to know, given the multitude of the infrastructure needs of the continent, different countries at different levels requiring different, sizes and shapes of infrastructure, to be able to unlock their potential. In the context of the BRICS, what do you think would be the best approach in terms of prioritization? Is it reasonable to more so do it in the form of regionally, so more like trying to get a regional block level kind of infrastructure project that we want to do? Is it okay to still focus on the respective countries' infrastructure needs? And even that, do we think we have to not box everything together and say, okay, for BRICS, there's a strategy that we want to use. We want to focus on these type of infrastructure development. How does that work? Or would you just open up the floodgates and just engage in any kind of infrastructure that we need on the continent? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think that if we look at it maybe from a broader perspective, Africa is constituted of different countries that have their own agenda and their own needs in terms of whether it is in terms of infrastructure development. We have different types of partnership with the BRICS bloc. I think that's something that I haven't necessarily developed, but this is something also to take into consideration and bear in mind that within the BRICS, China is the major partner for many countries. If we look at Brazil, for instance, they do not necessarily have strong ties with African countries. So in this specific context, when it comes to developing infrastructure, massive infrastructure, maybe this is the opportunity now to see how we can revitalize the relations. But in general, we do not have strong ties with Brazil, for instance. So I think that first we need to look at the countries, different countries need when it comes to infrastructure development. What are the priorities for the country itself? We see that in Ethiopia, they had different priorities. For instance, building a metro station. In DRC, we do not have this priority, but we do have other priorities when it comes to infrastructure development. So it's important to look at it from this perspective. And also, which partners have the capacity, whether it is the technical capacity, whether it is the financial capacity to become an ally in this, in our, to help us realize what we have decided in our national strategic plan funds.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to tie in just a follow-up on this, because in Africa, obviously, when we talk about infrastructure development, we all know how capital intensive they are, and then brings in question about debts and debt sustainability, in terms of, financial infrastructure by financing the sustainable way that will not in the long run put countries in a debt distress, situation. So what is your take on all of this debt infrastructure development and how, the financing can work in a sustainable way?
Yeah, something that that's also important to see, and I think that when we consider these different massive infrastructure projects, there are a lot of work when it comes to projects, the finance part of the project. Because usually what happens is that the partners, they would come also with when they have the project, to build the project, they have also the financial analysis, they have the different options and so on. So I think that it's important that on the African side that we also are prepared with our options, with our financial analysis, that we think that the best way to invest in that project in the long run, that it will benefit us. Also the possibility that if I consider what I previously said about the BOT, build, operate, and transfer model, that there are ways that along the way that we don't necessarily stay, in debt. That there will be money that will come out of the infrastructure that has been built, but there are also other ways that we can have money So I think I will go maybe into too much details. But for instance, that if they're the place that is occupied, they have to pay kind of I would say simply a fee, a monthly fee to the government, or there are other things that can be put into place to make sure that the government also that it's also viable for the government, and that we reduce the debt stress. If I may say, I'm not going to go into too much details with all the terms, the SPVs and so on, but I think I give the general idea.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rosemary, please, you may come in now if you have any more questions, or probably moderate the question that has been sent by the participants. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Dr. Nas, for answering the questions nicely. Now I have some few questions from the participants, of which I'll ask one by one, and you can also follow them by reading by yourself from the chat box. The first one comes from Suleiman Abubakar, who says, thank you for the presentation. Do you think African infrastructure development can be solely provided by foreign countries like China? Where is the place of local politicians?
Thank you. Countries like China, when they invest in infrastructure development, it's usually through the public-private partnerships. The public part of it represents the government, represents also politicians, and so on. The country, we have to rely on these types of partnerships to be able to build public infrastructure, develop massive infrastructure, because the country itself often lacks of whether it is funds or whether it is expertise, and so on. So for the time being, I don't want to say that we cannot do it by ourselves, but it's a great, I would say it's a great way to continue or to start, if I may say. But also, when we do have those types of investment, those types of partnerships, it's also important that we ensure technological transfer, so that in the future we will be able to do it by ourselves. We will have the capacity to do it by ourselves. And we have the technical expertise, the financial capacity, the technical capacity.
Thank you. The second one was, have we not come across the BRICS nations aligning financial resources to the very young entrepreneurs in Africa? What's the strategy for the very young entrepreneurs in Africa? Also, some practical examples will help.
Okay, thank you. I would say that I know that BRICS countries, that the world, the BRICS countries, the world, etc., we consider Africa youth population as a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity, actually. It's an advantage in African countries that we have a youth population that is eager to learn, that is ready to work. So that's a great opportunity. When it comes to entrepreneurship and what BRICS countries can do or doing for very young entrepreneurs, specifically, if I give an example, I can think about Alibaba, because now now we have entered this era we have entered digital era where societies, they are shifting towards internet-based economies, and a large number of African countries, they are now recognizing that the development won't be easily achievable without the digital component, and therefore they have digital agendas, they have digital strategic plans, they are incorporating the digital component in their national development plan, and so on. But considering now the example of Alibaba, each year they used to organize, they still organize competitions to promote entrepreneurship through internet. So they are promoting digital entrepreneurship. They are offering trainings, capacity building, funds, and so on. So it's a way for them to promote entrepreneurship, digital entrepreneurship in Africa, and it's limited in age. They are mostly focusing on the youth, on young entrepreneurs as well. So that's the example I can think of. And digitalization is the digital economy is a huge part of it's very, very significant in China. And also in other BRICS countries, such as Brazil, I think that the digital economy accounts for 20% of the economy overall. So I hope that that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. The other one is just a suggestion, like I'm wondering why Kenya and Nigeria are yet to be considered as part of BRICS family due to their respective economic development potentials in the African region. Could the propensity for this be interrogated? Will you answer that also?
Yes. I think because of time limitation, I will not go into too much details. I would say very general, but I would love to have a discussion later on, maybe on LinkedIn, where you can find me. But I would say that now that the BRICS countries, and I've mentioned it at the beginning, that the BRICS countries, they are gaining, since their creation, they are gaining in influence and in power. And we have not only come to Kenya and Nigeria, but we have 40 countries, over 40 countries that have expressed interest in joining the BRICS family. I think a few years ago, not long ago, there have been discussions within the BRICS on what would the criteria be if they were to consider new joiners. So now they are still at this stage, but I think this is something that's an interesting question, and that could be further discussed later on.
Yeah, I think so. Even to that, just coming in, I think it's going to be one of the key things on the agenda for the BRICS Summit happening later this month in South Africa. I mean, about the potential of welcoming new members, because I think the interest is growing. As you mentioned earlier, I think 24 who have been, more so being in the line, and as well as new countries that are joining, as you mentioned, almost 40 or so now. So I think it's going to be one of the key things from the BRICS Summit. I think out of that, we'll know how their founding members are going to position themselves to accommodate all the new members that want to join. I think it's going to be one of the key outcomes of the BRICS Summit. It's going to be high on the agenda, very much so, on how they're going to accommodate the new, members that are joining. I believe that it will still be BRICS. I mean, I'm not sure there's going to be changing acronyms and all of that. I'm not sure that, because it's been there since early 2000s, so I'm sure but there could be layers of, alliances, for the new members that want to join. Of course, it's not just about, it cannot be just about finding your country letter as part of the name. It's about what kind of position you find yourself in the alliance and what your role is going to be as a member of the alliance, basically. So I think it's going to be an interesting outcome from the summit in August, later in August, yeah. So we'll wait to see that. But as you mentioned, you can find Nancy on LinkedIn, Dr. Nancy Lohalo. Her name is shown on the screen on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you can engage her further on some of these discussions, yeah. Rosemary, you want to come in? I think that some few people have raised their hands too, I think, if I can check. So I'm going to allow, okay, maybe Nanajiman, I'm going to allow you, so you can, if you have a question, you can ask, and then we'll come back to the chat again to ask the other person that are there. Yeah. So I'm allowing you to speak now, and Nanajiman, you can unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question. Yeah. Najma, are you there? Okay, so it's not ready. Justin Masagati, I've given you permission to speak. If you have a question. Justin, are you there? Just unmute.
Yes, I'm there.
Yes. Now we can hear
Yes,
you.
My name is Justin. So my question is,
Justin, where are you joining us from?
the
Country?
yes,
Where?
Justin
Yeah, no, which country are you joining us
from Tanzania.
from? Tanzania, okay.
Tanzania, yeah. Yes, my question is how the Tanzania may benefit from the BRICS in development country, especially in developing country. Yes, how they benefit.
Okay, you mean how Tanzania will benefit from the BRICS, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. So your question is well noted. Nancy, you want to take that? Or
Yes, sure. Okay, so how can Tanzania benefit from the BRICS? I think this question is quite broad, and some aspects have been mentioned during this session. But maybe there are many ways that Tanzania can benefit from the BRICS, whether it is in terms of trade, of investment, of capacity building, people exchange, and so on. I think that since I've mentioned it before, when it comes to digitalization, I'm not quite familiar with the digital agenda of Tanzania. However, I can say that within the BRICS, there are countries that have well-developed, whether it is legal framework when it comes to digitalization, they have the capacity to build capacity in Tanzania to make sure that the digital literacy is reached at some level, and so on. So I think that if we consider maybe the digital aspect, there is a way to benefit. There are many other ways that we can benefit for the BRICS, and I think that sticking to this to the session today, that there are other information that will be additionally learned.
Thank you, Dr. Nance. To add on that, Tanzania also will benefit a lot from the BRICS in infrastructure development. As we can see, in our country, we have a lot of infrastructure development, of which China is helping in building those bridges, the roads, the railway, We have a lot. And then not only from China, from India, from South Africa, we are doing business with them. So today our agenda was on how Africa can benefit, but specifically if Africa as a continent benefits from the BRICS, then Tanzania wants to be we want to be left behind. We will also benefit, and the benefits are being seen clearly from the ground. To finish up, let me have two more questions. From Emmanuel on Nedpool, can the BRICS partnership lead to the creation of a unified digital currency, challenging the dominance of traditional reserve currencies like the US dollar? The last question is from the chat box. Can the BRICS partnership lead to the creation of a unified digital currency, challenging the dominance of the traditional reserve currency like the US dollar? Welcome, Dr. Nance.
Okay, thank you. For the question regarding the creation of the unified digital currency, I think that we have heard a lot that there will be discussions within the BRICS that they will create a currency that will be backed by gold in order to overturn the US dollar. I cannot confirm that this will come to realization from the upcoming meeting. There are lots of speculation around this, so we will have to wait and see if indeed there will be this specific subject. The question is if the money is actually the new currency is actually created, will the dollar be overturned? Also, this is something that we need to maybe focus on and have more analysis on the subject. I don't want to be too extreme, or I don't want to come with a response without having necessarily analyzed all the different aspects, especially given how strong the dollar is today, and that we are trading in dollars usually. A lot of currencies are backed with the US dollars. So for it to be overturned, it might take many years as well. So this is something that we need to really think about. And when it comes to the creation of a unified digital currency, that could be another option as well, but also to maybe to keep it for further discussion.
Yeah, I think I share in your perspective as well. I think it's going to be a long road, looking at how entrenched the world is in terms of the US dollars, domination. But of course, the signs are also there that there's a momentum being built around the fact that countries want to, first of all, so the first step is what excites me, that it's better we start trading our local currency. So even before we talk about coming up with a new currency to rival the US dollar of a sort, why don't you first start by trading, among ourselves in our local currencies, which is happening, especially the BRICS countries now, Brazil, China, India, Brazil, Russia, China, they're all trading their local currencies. And of course, even in Africa, that's the kind of agenda that is being pushed at the continental level. So from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, from the Pan-African payment system that has been launched with the past, backed by the Afrexim Bank, to see how, if we are based in Ghana, we are buying goods and services from someone in the DRC, in Tanzania or Kenya, how do I pay it? If it's Kenya, how do I pay in a Kenyan shilling, other than having to take my Ghana city, change dollar before I pay someone in Kenya with the dollars, So I think that is a very welcoming, because we all know how currencies across the continent have been battered over the years as respect of our dependence, of the US dollar. I mean, in Ghana, we've had currency depreciation within the last couple of months at levels that were very alarming, and all because we are still dependent on having to look for the dollar, which we don't have enough because we are not earning more, because when you earn more, that's when you get more coming in. And therefore pressure on your currency, and then you see currency depreciating, and it affects every other thing because it's a trickle-down effect like that. So I think it's a welcoming conversation, and I share in what you said that it's going to be a long road to say that, okay, the US dollar is finally out, but I think starting off by trading among member countries in respect of their local currency, I think is the step that I really, really welcome, and I hope that Africa can follow suit to ensure that among us as a continent, we trade in our local currencies. I'm going to welcome Professor Huda Hazami. So she is an advisory panel member of the ACCPA. She's based in Tunisia. I was with Professor Huda in another country recently. So, Prof. Huda, please, you can ask your question or make a comment.
Yes. You heard me? Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello from Tunisia. Hello for Olwen. Thank you, Dr. Nancy, for your valuable intervention. It's very good intervention. So the director of the BRICS Bank stated at the recent Afro-Russian summit the necessity of exchanging in local money. My question is whether this is available now for African countries in the face of the challenges that the continent faces today. Yes, this is my question. It's easy to exchange in money, in local money, African local money now. In our situation and that confront the African continent. So I am francophone. What I don't.
So, okay, here is it. You can speak French. Nancy speaks French. She's from francophone. Yeah.
C'est bien. Donc, la directrice de la banque de BRICS, elle a annoncé dans la dernière Russie-Africa sommet, la nécessité que les pays africains fait des commerces, c'est-à-dire fait des échanges et commerces avec des monnaies locales. La monnaie locale entre les Africains et les pays de BRICS. Ça veut dire de éloigner un peu de dollars américains. Donc, ma question c'est, est-ce que c'est possible dans cette conjoncture politique, géopolitique maintenant, qui fait faire le continent africain avec tous les problèmes? Donc, est-ce que c'est possible de faire le commerce avec des monnaies locales? C'est ça la question.
D'accord. Merci. Should I answer in French or in English?
No, in English. Yes, you can hear.
Okay. So considering the geopolitical situation now, I don't want to be too extreme and saying that no, it's not possible, or yes, it's possible to actually exchange in our local currency. But I think that we can start taking steps maybe toward that and analyze the different, how it can benefit us. But when we look maybe at the BRICS country, we have a part of them that are pro, let's say not independence, but that they wish that we had less of the US-led West dollar influence. And then we have another part of them that do not necessarily have the same the same determination. That's the word. So that maybe the relations with the US or the relations with the dollar is not necessarily the same as the relations, because as I mentioned before, we have different countries, different political regimes, different governments, and so on within the BRICS. So I don't know for sure if this is something that will be feasible or that won't be feasible. So I won't be too extreme, but I will leave the question in French en suspens.
Thank you very much. Rosemary, I want to come in. Is there any question that's from the participant that you'd like to ask so that we can be wrapping up soon? Yeah.
Okay. One last question is that how are young African entrepreneurs going to be able to play that major role, also looking at...
Sorry, Rosemary,
Yes.
I hardly hear you.
You can't hear me? Hello?
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 Yes, hello?
How about that? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I think, yeah.
Okay. Was reading the last question to be answered by Dr. Nance so that we wind up our discussion. How are young African entrepreneurs going to be able to play that major role? Also looking at women within the mining, transport, and logistics. These are the industries that require serious financial capability. Welcome, Dr. Nancy.
Thank you for the question. I'm not concentrating on the different sector, mining, transport, and logistics. But if I look maybe more from a young African women entrepreneur perspective, I would say that this is something that I written my doctoral thesis on, and it was for women, especially economically empowering women entrepreneurs through internet technologies, through digitalization, because women engaging in entrepreneurial activities in African countries are greater than anywhere else. However, they face incredible obstacles, whether it is from the beginning of from the creation to the development of the different businesses, whether it is to have access to finance, whether it is in terms of having the opportunities to engage in exporting activities, having the opportunities to integrate the formal sector, and so on. So I think that if we are able to leverage the BRICS to develop the digital sphere, that we will be able also to empower women through digital entrepreneurship, given that also many obstacles, they will be tackled. that they will have also the opportunity because obviously there is sometimes women also tend to engage in activities that are of proximity of their houses, of their homes, and so on. So there will also be this possibility. There will also be the possibility to build capacities for women and to also bridge the digital gender gap. So there are many aspects if you manage to leverage the BRIC to develop, to promote digital development, digital infrastructure, capacity building, and so on, that we will be able to economically empower young female entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much, Nancy. So I'm going to wrap it up by asking the last question, just briefly touch on it. So this is from Oscar. So Oscar is asking to embrace any long-living win-win collaboration. Africa needs to strengthen its pillars of self-reliance and self-supply. So how truly are we ready? Do you think we are ready to fully commit to the BRICS initiative? And I'm sure this is tied to the fact that we are now seeing that there's a huge potential with the BRICS initiative, that there could be more that the continent can gain if we strategically align. But the question that he's asking is, how committed are we to ensuring that as a continent, we are not just going in there to ask for it to come in, but we are also committed in our own way to truly create that win-win situation when it comes to our strategic interest in the BRICS alliance. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned before, today the global power is shifting. That we have been used to the same international power, the same international mechanism, and now it's shifting towards BRICS countries truly, with China as a major player. And Africa now has entered this era of new aspirations. Last century, we were facing with decolonization and trying to find some stability, to regain some identity, if I may say, still under this the international order that we were used to. And now that everything is shifting, so is our mindset. I think that that a lot of us are determined to be committed for change, that we need revitalization, that we are looking for new opportunities to develop our countries, and to become important player on the global, on the international platform.
Thank you very much, Nancy. So all too soon we've come to the end of the first panel session for this year's BRICS Dialogue. I want to say a big thank you to my colleagues, Dr. Rosemary Mnongya, who was our moderator for the session, and of course, Dr. Nancy Lohalo, who was our main speaker for this session. Once again, this is the BRICS Dialogue, which is an annual event that we hosted by the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. This year is virtual. We hope to do in-person events in the coming years. But we thank you very much for making the time to join us for the first session, the first panel session. The next one is starting at 11:45, so give or take, we're looking at about 18 or so minutes from now. We are starting the panel 2, where we'll be joined by 2 distinguished panelists, and I'll be the moderator for that session. So panel 2, we are looking at fostering inclusive trade and investment, amplifying Africa's engagement with BRICS. So the first part of that infrastructure investment and all of that relating to the BRICS. The next session, we are going deeper to look at trade and international related issues. So we want to invite you again that you could join us. Same link as you used to join this session. I'm sure if you check your email, you receive another email from us. Welcome you to join the next session in the next 17 or so minutes, which is going to be on panel 2. So once again, thank you all for joining. We hope to welcome you back in the next few minutes so that we can conclude this year's BRICS Summit. So thank you very much, Rosemary. Thank you, Nancy. and we'll rejoin the next session. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.